Hello, everyone. My name is Andriy, and today we are going to have a conversation with Kenric Nelson. Uh, we'll speak about Cardano governance. Kenric Nelson is for a long time studies Cardano governance, and I think governance in general, governance in other blockchains. Maybe we met in Project Catalyst right now. I'm doing a series of interview regarding Cardano and Project Catalyst. So, Kenric, nice to meet you. My first question would be introductional. How did you get involved into cryptocurrency world and Cardano particularly?
Thank you, Andre, for hosting me. I've been looking forward to talking with you, and I've enjoyed collaborating together. Yeah, my journey into cryptocurrency was kind of interesting. I had worked for many years. I'm a U.S. citizen, and following 9/11, I spent a good bit of my career working in the defense sector. And then around 2015, I took a part time position as a faculty member at Boston University. And there I was collaborating with a group with expertise in complex systems. And in particular, their current work was in modeling financial systems. And it was through that collaboration that I learned about the whole phenomena of cryptocurrencies in the summer of 2017. And I was actually surprised as a technologist that I had not prior to that been aware of it. But decided to dive right in. I thought that hands-on learning is the best way to go about it. So I opened up some accounts, started trading a small amount of money. And although I did not have experience at that time in trading, I had colleagues where that had been their profession. So I started reaching out to them to kind of learn the basics. And then, I kind of did an evaluation of the space. And obviously, in those initial months, Ethereum was very attractive. Bitcoin, of course, has been dominant throughout the whole period of time. But I was particularly attracted to what Cardano was seeking to accomplish. Charles Hoskinson gave a series of lectures in Cambridge, and which were quite interesting. And that was sort of my starting point to begin focusing more of my time in the Cardano space. And that eventually evolved to starting Fotrek as a small business and submitting proposals to the Catalyst program.
In this context, it would be interesting to ask. So the Fortrack, your company, it actually started in Catalyst, or thanks to the Catalyst, or it existed before.
Um, that's partly true. So it definitely started with an intention of working in the cryptocurrency space, and my focus was Cardano. However, as a small business person, I kind of feel that uh, while you have to be focused, you do have to have some diversification too. So our first contracts were actually with Brown University, and we're continuing to work with Brown University on projects related to environmental justice. In particular, the talented young professor we're working with is helping the city of Jackson, Mississippi, recover from some devastating um, tragedies regarding environmental collapse of that city. So then the other focus area and my own expertise is in developing machine learning techniques that are risk aware. We have a method of incorporating risk into the way machine learning algorithms are trained. And then the cryptocurrency has been kind of a vehicle for applying those things and kind of a foundation for how we can make positive changes in the world, both particularly in terms of managing risk. Um, those risks can be financial, those risks can be kind of the issues we're dealing with climate change. And one sort of risk that involves decision making is governance. So we've actually become very active in advocating governance policies that will strengthen the decentralization of the Cardano community.
Yeah, that's interesting. And as a proposer in Catalyst Funds, you were successful with several proposals. I remember one of the proposals, research proposals, I also joined and contributed a little bit. And that's good to know that Catalyst, as a decentralized autonomous organization or decentralized autonomous fund, it provides some financial possibilities and for companies, for small companies.
Right.
And
Yeah, our very first project was in Fund 6. We proposed to the diversify voting influence. And that was in collaboration with one of my colleagues at Boston University. He was a visiting professor at BU, and he's a full-time professor and director at in Brazil. And he has exceptional skills in simulating complex systems. We did analysis of voting methods, and it was kind of an interesting process because we came into it with the knowledge that because of what's called Pareto distributions of wealth, there's little to no chance that a voting system based on wealth can actually be decentralized. You immediately, because of that distribution, have centralized powers within that kind of a structure. So we wanted to educate the community about that. And then our thought and what we proposed was that you could do a reweighting of wealth in order to get a distribution that would be truer to the values of decentralization. But in the process, we learned about the work of Glenn Weil and Eric Ponzer in their invention of what they call quadratic voting. And more recently, they've been calling plural voting. And the heart of that is actually an acceptance of wealth distribution and sort of being okay with that as a starting point. But what they identified as the real issue is that it's critically important for the price of influence to be appropriately priced. And that one coin, one vote, or one share, one vote actually doesn't properly price influence. Now, to kind of just simplify that, it turns out that as you're able to correlate your votes, like having one large wallet, your influence grows quadratically or approximately quadratically. So, in order to counter that, it's critically important to take the square root of that wallet as a way to properly price influence, and thereby give people who have more resources the right to use those resources, but require them to pay a fair price for that influence.
so, would it be correct to simplify that if the voting, because now for people who don't know how the voting happens, we have the system that one ADA, one vote. So if you are ADA holder, or if you want to become ADA holder, you can register in the time. For example, right now in this period for Fund 10, it's late to register. Voting will happen from 31st of August. But if you have 500 ADA or more, then you can vote and participate in this. One ADA, one vote. So the more ADA you have, the bigger influence you have, and the bigger reward you will have. because voting is also incentivized. That's
Right.
also the case in many other blockchains. And if there would be quadratic voting, it will, as I understand, it will limit the power of big holders, big wallet holders. Yes, limit
Yes.
its influence.
But I also want to emphasize, because I think this part of it, there's been sort of some misunderstandings about why this is important. It's not that large holders should be limited in how they use their resources to participate in the voting. It's rather that they should be required to pay a fair price for that influence. And because their influence will grow quadratically, they should pay a quadratic price.
So in this
And
case, do we mean transaction price because the transaction is the same for all, or do they need to? Um, yeah, how
yeah,
can?
so now this, let me go, actually let me introduce something else. You know, see, part of the challenge is, and I encourage everyone to pick up the book Radical Markets by Glenn Weil and Eric Posner, and or their scientific literature, because they do provide some really interesting insights about this. The key thing that has to be addressed is that public resources require different kind of management than private resources. You know, if you're looking at private, like my own, you know, the, private management of Photreck or private management of other companies, well, there the accountability comes from your own personal profit and your ability to satisfy customers. But as cryptocurrency networks grow, they really do transition from private enterprises. They may be private in the sense of the way they got started, but particularly for the top 10, these really evolve into public resources. And the leadership of the Cardano Foundation has been very clear that they want the Cardano network to be a public resource that will benefit humanity for a long, long time. And that's part of what I think is attractive to me and others who've chosen to participate in the Cardano community, is that vision of making a positive impact on the future of humanity. Now, public resources are very challenging to manage because there's a, you know, we all come into it with kind of our personal preferences and biases, and somehow you have to aggregate everybody's information, knowledge, and opinions into a community decision. So it's understanding the dynamics of that process that become critically important. Um, Maybe I'll share a little bit more about quadratic voting, but then maybe we can also open the lens a little bit to the whole Voltaire design. So,
Yes.
in trying to address how to manage a public market, what was suggested by what the full process of the quadratic voting isn't simply um, the weighting of wallets, but it's actually allowing people to express the strength of their preferences. So, in particular, what's currently missing from Catalyst right now, we do a timestamp and you get a weight, or you get a certain number of votes. But you can apply those votes to every single proposal. And there's now thousands of proposals. It's beyond the scope of any one individual to understand all those proposals. It's even beyond the scope of any DREP. You know, as we're looking to the future, even a representative would not be able to judiciously evaluate all of those proposals.
Well, for
What
representative, I could argue that he or she they can, because there would be financial incentive, and as I remember, there was a plan, so it might be like up to $3,000 or analogy, and those who really care, they can use some part of this incentive to get aids or like assistance. The same like in politics, members of parliament or congressmen, they have a big team of assistants. And
Yes, but even in that context, we all have different expertise. And so, for instance, members of Congress will sit on different committees, where they do, where they focus on different issues. The What we're proposing with our proposal for democratic pluralism is that instead you would be assigned, your wallet is a budget, and you think of that wallet as a way of investing in these public choices. And so you don't have to vote on all the proposals. You can choose to focus your entire budget on one proposal. But as you express that strong preference about a particular proposal, it would be weighted quadratically. Or you could choose to spread your budget across a lot of proposals. And so then that quadratic rule would not be as influential, because the quadratic rule would apply to how you allocate for each proposal. So you could kind of then you can kind of make some strategic choices about, if there's a particular proposal you feel very strongly about, you'll invest more in that one. On the other hand, if there's some other ones that you want to express your opinion, but you don't feel as strongly about, you can kind of do it modestly and then have more resources to spread across more proposals. That was kind of the key insight that Glenn Weil was bringing to improving voting systems. And then I'm not sure that we're not proposing this in our current project. This might be something for the community to think about longer term. He also had an interesting twist on this too. If rather than just time stamping and then allocating a budget, you actually did a transaction where you had to kind of pay for votes per proposal, then that money could be pooled into a smart contract. And at the end of the voting, it would be equally dispersed to all participants. And that equal disbursement is critical because, again, this is supposed to be a public decision, and it's supposed to support and enable growth of the entire community. So this would provide an incentive for people to participate, but it would also recognize that those with a lot of resources and also very strong opinions, they're getting their reward by being very influential on getting, for instance, maybe their own proposal funded. But they're making an investment in the community because that purchase would then be dispersed broadly to the community.
So in this case, the funds of that wallet, they are not returned to the owner, but to everyone who committed a vote.
Exactly. Yes. And here's the thing. I understand there's probably, we're not planning to do this now, and it would require discussion. And I understand there might be some opposition to this approach. But consider the following. If you look at the Catalyst reward system right now in isolation, if that was the only process, obviously it's not, but in isolation, that process drives centralized control of the Catalyst program. Because every round, the largest holders of ADA receive more coins. And so if you ran that process in an infinite loop, the end result would be one wallet holding all of the coins. And so oftentimes things that seem intuitive, right? If you're a large holder and you're just getting the same percentage return, seems fair, seems logical. But the end result is to drive the whole process towards centralized control, which is the opposite of what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I see. And this idea, I'm not sure it will work when people have to send transaction from their own wallets. But what it seems for me, it might work well if DREPs, delegated representatives, this position is supposed to be implemented in the future funds. If they will
Yeah.
do the same with, let's say, catalyst rewards or those funds which are public, which are from the treasury. In this
Yeah.
case, nobody loses money, and DREPs, as a analogy of congressmen, they just help to shape the spending, help to shape and choose where to direct it.
Right. That could very well be. And in as we think maybe about the Voltaire governance and the governance of the chain itself, uh, core to the SIP 1694 proposal is a notion that it's going to have three branches of governance. And of course, the point of that is to provide some independence and some checks and balances between different groups in the community. We've written a series of essays critiquing SIP 1694. And one of the first concerns we pointed out is that by starting with the premise that we don't have the ability to identify the DREPs, we are also eliminating the possibility that the three branches will be independent of each other, right? Because at a very rough level, the largest SPOs will likely become the largest DREPs. And then in that role, they will elect themselves to be members of the Constitutional Committee. So we're kind of set up in a situation where the exact same people are going to be serving in all three branches. So I think that really hurts the independence between the branches. So one
So
of the things we go ahead.
it might be the situation that, uh, like it happens in oligarchic democracies and in many other democracies, that big holders, they can just choose the workers, employees of their companies to be a DREPs. There won't be any direct link, but they can, for example, let's say to one of the employees, okay, you'll be now a DREP, we are going to vote for you. And in this case, if the large holders, they have enough funds, the DREP won't even need to make some kind of campaign and other, they will have enough votes to have that.
Yes, that's absolutely true too. You know, so again, you have a situation where even if you see on the surface, it seems like a DREP or a constitutional committee member is independent. Behind the scenes, there could actually be someone that they're working for and that they're privately representing. So, you know, these are the challenges of public governance. We, as a way to kind of strengthen, well, one of the things in studying decision systems is that there are no perfect decision systems, and that's kind of been proven mathematically that there are no perfect ways to design a decision system. So one of the things is it's very helpful to have different processes. So what we advocated in one of our reports about SIP 1694 is that each branch should have a very distinct decision process. So we advocated that the SPOs continue with their method with the saturation, and that just be refined and improved to make sure that the saturation is actually also providing some limits on how large multi-pool operations can become. We advocate that the DREPs use the quadratic voting formalism, and including this preferential, rank choicing aspect of it. And then with the Constitutional Committee, we've recommended applying the processes of sociocracy because it fits so well with judicial processes. And ultimately, the Constitutional Committee is like a judicial branch in that its requirement is to make sure that proposals are adhering to the Constitution. The sociocracy works a little bit like a jury system in the sense that rather than voting on a decision, you have round discussions where you present ideas and also present objections to those ideas, and you continue discussing a proposal until you've resolved all the objections, and everybody in the committee is confident that the decision will be beneficial to the community. They don't all have to agree to a particular proposal, but they do all have to agree that there's no major objections to it. And that process has been a real eye opener for me. We've actually begun to apply the principles of sociocracy to the way we run FOTREC. And we're just now reviewing a operating agreement that will transition FOTREC to work under these sociocratic principles. And as a first step to that, I formed a leadership team of the engineers and managers who are working for FOTREC. And then the advisory committee that's been counseling me on developing FOTREC is also working under this method.
Yeah, it's also always very good to apply these principles or the new advancement in your environment. And I would like to ask because we spoke about Cardano governance, so maybe for the viewers, and I think for new people it might be easy to get mixed what is Catalyst and Cardano governance in general. We're speaking about SIP 1694. SIP is Cardano improvement proposal. So like in many blockchains, there are improvement proposals which, if they are voted and supported, they affect all the blockchain. So that's actually the way blockchains evolve. And Voltaire is the fifth stage of or era of development. There was staking era, then scaling era. They are on the website. So Voltaire is like the final governance stage. And how do you see, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, so Catalyst is a part of Voltaire. It's might seem the very important part because that's the place where real people come and they speak, and every Wednesday there is a town hall, and the funds are going on. It used to be several funds per year. There are new projects, new companies, but the basics. This is this SIP principle, Cardano improvement proposals, which will change the system how Cardano is governed. Yes.
Yes. So when Cardano was founded, it was founded by three organizations: Input Output Global, Emergo, and the Cardano Foundation. And each of them had a different role. And the network was originally just three nodes that validated the transactions. And then, of course, under the Shelley era, we transitioned to the stake pool operations, and we're now up to 3,000 nodes that do the validation. And at the recent workshop in Edinburgh. The research team at Edinburgh University did show that Cardano is one of the most decentralized networks right now. So I think that's a real success story for Cardano. And, we want to make sure that that continues into the distant future. I have been critical of the plans for Voltaire governance. I think the plan certainly decentralizes participation. Many more people are going to be able to vote either through being a DREP or through delegating their ADA to a DREP. But participation doesn't necessarily mean that the process itself will be decentralized or the power and influence will be decentralized. And that's where my concerns have lied. Now, I
And
will say,
according to this system, DREPs will vote for SIPs for changes. DREPs,
right.
ADA holders will delegate. So because right now ADA holders, they delegate their funds to stake pools in order to receive some interest. And comparing with other blockchains, it's a really decentralized network, because we can see some other blockchains are really dominated by some of the big players. And in Cardano, actually, really anybody can create a stake pool. It will be very hard to attract holders, attract a necessary amount of ADA, because actually creating a business, because it's might be considered like a small business, it's not easy in many other areas too. But now DREPs will be voting if this change implemented, and Catalyst DREPs, it will be like another DREPs, or they will be like the same DREPs, or it's not decided yet.
I think, well, the Catalyst DREPs and the Cardano DREPs are separate programs. And exactly how that's going to evolve, I think, is still a little bit open. But last year, there was sort of some momentum towards starting the Catalyst DREPs. But this year, the focus has been getting the Cardano Voltaire governance off the ground. Where to me, there was a very fundamental choice made that I think was unfortunate and is critical to fix either now or in the very near future. There was an assumption made in SIP 1694 that it was not possible to validate digital identities, and therefore they're not required for the DREPs. However, in the process, you lose the possibility that the DREP program is going to be decentralized. And let me explain that a little bit further. One of the critical innovations that has made Cardano's SPO program work and work uniquely well is the decision to saturate the pools. So by saturating the pools, delegators are incentivized to spread their delegation across many, many different pools. And it has basically worked. We have 3,000 different pools up and running. We do have companies that are running multiple pools, and this is a long-term issue. But in the short term, it hasn't. I didn't realize this until I saw the Edinburgh report, that while it's a concern, it still has not significantly hurt the decentralization of the Cardano network. Now, long term, it's understood to be a threat and a security risk. And there are SIP proposals to try to address that, to make sure that there's some kind of saturation on the ability to run multi-pools. That's critical. In contrast, there's no plan for any saturation of the DREP pools. And so it will be centralized. Whether that was the intent or not, I can't say. But the outcome is going to be centralized control around a few DREPs. And let me explain how this mispricing of influence is going to drive centralization of the DREP program. I said, it's established by Penrose back in the 1950s that the influence grows approximately quadratically. If you take the derivative of a quadratic, a parabola, right, you get a straight line, you get linear. What does that mean in terms of how people allocate their eta? It means that if I own a small amount of eta, the influence that I contribute to the Cardano DREP program isn't my eta. It's the size of the pool that I contribute to. Because if I contribute to a large pool, then I get that quadratic bonus. My small contribution is, adds quadratically to that pool. Whereas if I add my eta to a small pool, then I'm at that low scale and it's a very small influence. So the eta holder is not going to evaluate which DREP best represents their values. They're going to narrow their choice down to a few of the very largest pools and make a choice about which of the largest pools they're going to add their eta to. So, as soon as there's any differentiation in the size of the pools, the largest pools are going to have you're going to have huge benefits to delegating your eta to the largest pools. And so it has to be centralized. There's no constraint on that. And so I say, and I said this very bluntly at the Edinburgh conference, SIP 1694 is designed to centralize control in this DREP program. It is not a plan for decentralization.
Yeah, as I remember in DREP's proposition for Catalyst, which we also discussed a while ago, and it was presented in a meeting for DREPs, the idea was that there is a saturation of 1% of total votes, so for each DREPs.
That's correct. And again, the Catalyst DREP program had a plan for centralization. I learned at the Edinburgh conference that the IOG research team had advocated for and had assumed that saturation was part of the design. But at some point, the Voltaire team decided to remove saturation. And in removing saturation, they removed the possibility of the program being a plan for decentralization.
So what is the time frame for this proposal and for Voltaire era?
I don't know the specifics of that. The last workshop was held and the SIP 1694 has crossed one approval process where it's no longer being edited. And so I understand that later this year, there may be a vote by the SPOs and the Federation to actually activate SIP 1694. I don't recommend that in its current form because I think you have to address the issue of saturation if you're serious about decentralization. So it's my recommendation that the issues around potential centralization of the DREP pools be fixed before this be approved.
Yeah, and in this case, Catalyst might, if let's imagine the Catalyst evolves faster than the whole network, then it can be a place for, like we say, every town hall, a place for experiment. So
right, and then now it's also important to be upfront about why they've held back. The hard problem is identity, but the way to think about it in my framework is that while humans can use the Cardano network and even operate the Cardano network in a permissionless way, that is only because at the software level, every single node has a very strong identity that is validated by the other nodes. When we transition to wanting to put a human layer of governance over the network, the first and most important problem to solve is how you're going to identify the governors. And by choosing not to work on that problem, Cardano chose not to work on decentralized governance. You can't have decentralized governance without identity of the governors because you have no way to control the independence of those nodes.
Yeah, that seems reasonable for me. And if let's imagine that somebody is really very curious about privacy, very privacy focused, and well, first of all, there are other blockchains which are more, let's say, more privacy focused. And another aspect is that okay, then it's possible to choose, let's imagine, a friend or colleague whom they can support, to be who is not afraid and who maybe doesn't care about losing some moment of privacy, or just there are many people who like publicity, who admire publicity.
Yeah.
That's why we have the whole this trend of social networks and influencers. So it doesn't look for me like a big problem to present identity. That
Exactly. I think the DREP role is naturally a public role. You're supposed to be recruiting ADA from other members of the community. So they're at some level, those that actually are going to be attracting ADA from the community will have to provide some kind of identity in order to attract a pool. You then have the possibility that there will be private wealth that will be represented by private DREPs. But there, my case is that they should still provide some minimum level of identity as a protection for the community. And then that's the point, is that that identity is needed to make sure that each pool is unique and independent of other pools. And by doing that, then you can also design other voting processes. The Cardano has made the assumption that they can ignore the problem of identity and instead use wealth as the identifier. So there, we identity. Maybe the other way to say it is identity is a requirement, and the identity they chose is wealth. But in choosing wealth as the identifier, they chose centralized control. They chose not to work on decentralized governance.
Yeah, if we speak about financial or wealth identity, in this case, the wealth distribution in Cardano was not equal, because first of all, it happened many years ago in 2017 in ICO process, but I think the majority of active Cardano members of the community, they were not there yet, because that's still we are still in the early days of cryptocurrencies. And if, like Charles Hoskinson likes to say, Cardano has ambition to become the world's financial operating system, the 99.9% of Cardano users are still not here. And but in this case, wealth distribution, it already happened. In this case, for example, as crypto researcher and enthusiast, I like to research other projects, and I see one of the maybe easiest and it's maybe primitive wealth distribution is with these walking apps. So like Sweet Coins, Step, and then when you walk and you get rewards, small rewards every day for walking. That's also possible to manipulate, because some people can have several phones. Some people, I imagine, could create some farms or distribute this, but because the price is so low, there is no financial incentive. But
Yeah, and I want to be clear too. I'm not trying to suggest that the governance should be egalitarian. What I go back to my first statements that what I'm saying is that uh, given that it's an economic system and given that votes are going to be weighted by a financial asset, ADA in this case, what's important is that that weight reflect a fair price on the market for influence. It shouldn't be, and being very clear that one ADA, one vote does not represent a fair market. It represents a market that will centralize control. We have hundreds of years of history of this in corporate governance. We accept one share, one vote as corporate governance, but we also accept that corporate governance is largely centralized. And there are other mechanisms to hold those central actors accountable. But the premise in cryptocurrency is that we're going to remove those accountability mechanisms, but we're going to replace it with processes that can be proven to be decentralized. And that's the missing piece with Cardano's governance plan, is they haven't proven that it's going to be decentralized.
yes, but there might be some other ways, and I'm not looking to egalitarianism or something like this. For example,
Yeah.
and it just came to my mind, and let's choose Catalyst as example. Maybe for voting there can be created another coin, token on Cardano, and that's actually in some of the other blockchains there exist governance tokens, which are distributed from certain date. Let's imagine from Fund 11 to active participants, uh, like those who visit town halls, they get some small amounts. Those who write comments, well, of course, logical comments, not a spam, they also get some community, these governance tokens. And in this case, some other tokenomics can be made for these governance influence tokens, and it can include or it can be combined with ADA, with the number of ADA a wallet has,
Right.
and the number of these particular tokens the wallet.
Yeah, that's an excellent suggestion. In fact, our team also works with SingularityNet, which is focused on using cryptocurrency to build an ethical AI marketplace. And they've made the commitment to plural governance using the quadratic voting. And they already have kind of a primitive system of measuring engagement and contribution in their community. And our current contract with Singularity Network is to build a software prototype to make that more efficient. And actually, we're proposing for the next round to build a minimum viable product of measuring engagement and participation in the Singularity Net community. And just like you're describing, we're actually going to propose a smaller ideation project to look into whether that can be represented in a token or in a DID or some other way of keeping track right on the blockchain of the level of participation and engagement of different members of the community. And as you're describing, that becomes a weight that complements the amount of aid, or in their case, AGIX coins that the voters can apply to making decisions.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting, and Singularity is interesting project. I remember a few years ago, I even met Ben Goertzel in
Oh, great.
event in Dubai. It was, and it's very good that this project is also they had Ethereum based token, but they also made the Cardano token. I think it was one of the first tokens on Cardano network, and definitely one of
Yeah, and I know people are very concerned about the phenomena of splitting wallets with quadratic voting. But one of the interesting things in Singularity Net is because they use both the Ethereum and this Cardano networks, many people have more than one wallet. And they now have a mechanism of combining your wallets into one pool to represent yourself. And people use it. I use it myself. So I know that on the one hand, I'm decreasing my influence. But on the other hand, it's a convenience mechanism. And I don't really feel a need to split my wallet to try to improve my influence. So, yes, that's a concern, but it's not as big a concern as people are making it out to be. All, um,
Yes, thanks. I advise everyone who's interested in Cardano governance to check your proposal. I'll put a link in the video. And
yeah, great. Yeah, we're really excited to work on the Catalyst improvement system. It's the Catalyst systems improvements. And there's a lot of terrific proposals in that category. We're hopeful that we'll be one of the awardees and we'll be able to collaborate with the other awardees.
yes, and I hope let's do maybe in some time another interview focusing on some of the maybe what do you think this topic of SIP 1694, does it maybe require separate conversation on it?
Yeah, perhaps. And I should also just give a big shout out and thanks to Snaprilla and QA DAO who partnered with us on that proposal. Their Snaprilla has already developed the quadratic voting. It's, I don't know if people are aware of it, but the quadratic voting as a capability is already on the Cardano network. The next step is actually to utilize it. Snaprilla did build it under Catalyst funding. And QA DAO has done terrific work on documentation of governance processes within Cardano. So we're looking forward to having their support in documenting our research in this area.
Yeah, thank you for the interesting conversation. So I wish you success with your proposal.
Thank you, Andre. It was great to have the opportunity to talk with you.
Yeah, thanks. Goodbye.